Well, greetings and welcome to another edition of Two Bald Guys. I'm Eric Giordano, Director of the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service.
And I'm Dave Anderson, a Senior Policy Fellow at WIPS. I've been doing that for about 2 years following my 29 years of service in education and at the local, state, and federal levels of government.
So Dave, can you just tell us a little bit about WIPS?
Absolutely. So WIPS is a unit of the University of Wisconsin system. And actually for over 12 years now, WIPS has had a mission of educating and engaging citizens, developing future leaders, and helping communities address issues that they care about. So it's really a diverse mission, doing some interesting work.
Thank you.
This week we thought we'd add a new feature, Eric, to our show by asking our 2 or 3 viewers to respond to a hot button poll topic question. This week's poll is a simple question. Do you agree or disagree with the Wisconsin Supreme Court's decision to rescind the Safer at Home order?
Right, and our guest this week is going to be talking about that, so you're welcome to take the poll now, or you can take it after you've heard from our guest. To access the poll, we've posted a link on the Facebook page that you should be seeing there, or if you don't or have trouble with that, you can go to wips.org/poll. That's WIPPS.org/poll. Our featured guest will be discussing the legal ins and outs of this decision, so we're looking forward to that. Meanwhile, if you have any comments or suggestions about future topics or hair puns that you want to send along, please do to info@wips.org. And you know what they say, Dave? Sharing is caring.
There you go.
All right. Well, speaking of sharing, it's time for our hair-raising story of the week, and we're pleased to introduce our favorite producer and representative of an attractive younger demographic, Luke Rudolph. Luke, what story have you spent hours and hours and hours researching for us this week?
We've got a doozy. This is out of Virginia. So 2 robbery suspects in Virginia have been dubbed the melon-headed bandits after their strange choice in disguise was caught on camera. Photos show the 2 suspects wearing watermelons on their heads with eye holes cut out. Police captured and charged one of the bandits with wearing a mask in public while committing larceny, as well as stealing alcohol while underage. Police say they are still looking for the second watermelon head.
You know, Luke, I wonder if this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. When I was shopping yesterday, I went to my first store in a long time. There was a sign on the door that said, "For the safety of our customers, please wear a mask." So I think this is a simple misunderstanding, and they were simply trying to comply with the new environment that we're operating in. Or Eric, it might be that they thought after the robbery that they would blend in with everybody else wearing a mask. I don't know. One of those 2 things, I think.
Wow, that's a pretty generous interpretation of what was going on. I'm kind of speechless. Well, first of all, Luke, thanks for not sharing a story about animals this week. Number 1. Number 2, I'm just trying to imagine these guys sitting around, probably partaking of some magical substance and hatching this idea. I mean, honestly, wouldn't you have loved to have been fly on the wall in that room and hearing that conversation? I guess, Dave, my biggest problem with this whole thing is that these guys are really giving large, smooth heads a bad reputation. So anyway, Luke, that's an awesome story. Thank you. Well, it's now time to turn to our featured guest. And this week's featured guest is Dr. Eric Kasper, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire and Director of the Center for Constitutional Studies. Eric is an author and frequent presenter in our state of Wisconsin, as well as nationally on constitutional issues. And I think we can all see just by looking at him how razor sharp he is. So welcome, Professor Kasper.
Well, sorry. I just want to thank you for having me. It's a great show. I try to catch it every week. I hope you two are together doing this show for a long time. The last thing we need is for the 2 bald guys to have a split end.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. Applause. Luke, where's the rim shot? Luke, we are waiting for that rim shot, okay?
And just to set the record straight here, Eric Kasper, this isn't an audition for 3 bald guys. It's going to be 2 bald guys moving into the future. So
Unless,
but
unless of course we need a co-host, unless we
that's
decide to change
true.
co-hosts.
That's true.
Which could happen.
Are you hinting at anything?
Well, we'll just see how your performance is. So.
Eric, just to kind of set the stage for today's conversation, on what basis did the Wisconsin Supreme Court actually make its decision to rescind the executive branch's safer at home mandate here in the state of Wisconsin?
Right. Well, the decision last week from the state Supreme Court ruled that the statewide emergency order by the DHS Secretary Designee Palm was a rule. And what that means is that under state statutes, there's a series of procedures that statewide rules have to undergo before they can take effect. It has to meet certain notice requirements. There have to be certain hearings available. It has to be published in a certain way. And these are restrictions that the legislature put in for rules that are made under authority exercised in the executive branch that had been delegated by the legislature. And so since that hadn't been done, what the court ruled is that the rule itself issued by Secretary Designee Palm was not enforceable.
Do you think this ruling was groundbreaking in its nature, or do you think it was more of a technical ruling that kind of has turned into a political hot potato given the environment that we're in?
Well, the ruling itself was rather narrow in the sense that it was looking specifically at procedures that have to be followed for the exercise of power by a cabinet secretary in the state when acting pursuant to authority delegated by the legislature. The ruling was specific that if those procedures are followed, then that type of authority could be exercised in the future. The ruling also was very explicit that it was not interpreting either state statutes or the state constitution to restrict the governor's executive authority. And so it's on a relatively narrow issue, although obviously that's the issue of the moment here in terms of the pandemic and how the state was responding.
Yeah, Eric, the results from what we can see of the ruling is obviously it sort of turned power, if you will, or at least control over to local authorities, right? There's no longer any state mandates or rules, I guess, as you put it. And now local authorities, the local municipalities, local governing boards have to make decisions around health issues. And so on the surface, it seems like local controls won the day, but on closer inspection, it's a bit complicated, right? Because some local authorities are fearing about opening up too soon, and they actually kept in place the safer at home mandates. And then others really have sort of said, we're loosening this. So I'm just wondering, what is the sort of legal implication for local authorities around this issue?
Yeah, well, for county health departments, for instance, or other local authorities, they have to consider two things, basically, to kind of boil it down to its simplest level. One is the risk, obviously, to public health and public safety during an ongoing pandemic, and the concerns that local authorities have, not just during COVID-19, but all the time, the concerns that they have in terms of protecting public health and public safety. But on the other hand, they also have to weigh the concerns of the possible risk of lawsuit, that if they take certain actions or if they order certain things to be done, that they could be sued in state or federal court. To that point, there was an opinion issued by the State Attorney General's office last week saying that the state Supreme Court ruling was on this rather narrow issue of the authority of the state DHS secretary, and that county health departments actually have separate authority under which they can make these types of orders. But of course, there is the risk that if those orders are reviewed in state courts, that a similar analysis might be undertaken that was undertaken by the state Supreme Court when looking at that county health department authority, for instance. And so, basically that means some local governments have issued orders, some issued them and then rescinded them in some cases within 24 hours. And some, in fact, many local health departments have not taken any action since the state Supreme Court's decision.
Dave, can I ask a quick follow-up? So Eric, the local authorities that rescinded, that put them out there and then rescinded, what is there an explanation for why they did that?
At least for some of those counties, what we've seen is them thinking that the orders are not legal, basically following the same rationale as what was reasoned by the state Supreme Court. In others, they've lifted them now because they've said that they don't see the same risk, at least at the moment, from the pandemic. And so, in a state with 72 counties, we're not exactly seeing 72 different answers, but we're seeing a number of different responses given the diversity of those counties, and also the fact that in some counties you have more of these cases or a higher per capita rate of these cases than you have elsewhere.
Eric, as a constitutional scholar, what do you think are the rights that are at stake here? Are there winners and losers in terms of rights and freedoms as a result of this decision?
Yeah, well, there are several key constitutional rights that are at issue. And in fact, there was just yesterday a lawsuit filed in federal court here in Wisconsin challenging some of the local rules that are still in effect that were put in place after the state Supreme Court's decision. One of those rights is a freedom of speech, and connected to that, the freedom of assembly. And when courts are reviewing those types of challenges, they're going to ask, when the government is doing things that restrict the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly in a public forum, is there a significant interest that the government is pursuing? Are they using narrowly tailored means? And if they are restricting speech, are there ample alternative channels of communication? And so for some of these orders, that will be the type of analysis courts will undertake when they're trying to see if those restrictions on speech are constitutional. Similarly, if the freedom of religion is being restricted in terms of, for instance, a local rule that might say we're putting a ban on religious gatherings at places of worship, or restrictions on that. Generally in Wisconsin, what the courts are going to ask if the government is burdening religion is, does the government have a compelling interest, and are the means they're using to achieve that interest, are those means the least restrictive ones or the least burdensome ones to religion? And then for a final example, we have questions around property rights, where there are questions about the closing of businesses or restrictions on those businesses. There, the courts tend to be more deferential to the government, that the government just needs a legitimate interest, and the means used to achieve that interest need to be rationally related. But some of these orders also may raise questions about equal protection of the law, depending on how, what the rationale is for the government to say, we're going to deem certain businesses essential and certain businesses unessential. So those are kind of the different tests that we're likely to see once these cases get themselves into court, if these local orders continue.
It's fascinating. Looking at sort of like current policy issues, Eric, once the Supreme Court issued the stay on the stay at home or rescinded the stay at home order of the governor's, the executive branch, I should say, there was some talk that maybe the legislature would step in and somehow create a new set of statewide rules or standards on what to do, but that hasn't happened. Is there any indication that this may happen, that the legislature may create some of these statewide rules, or are they simply content with letting local authorities handle these issues? I noticed the governor, for example, he seems to be a bit toothless now around this issue, in the sense that he's issuing some tweets about what he thinks should be done, but they're just suggestions from what I can see.
Yeah, and in fact, when the decision by the state Supreme Court was issued last week, there was in a concurring opinion by the Chief Justice, where she was basically saying, that I trust the parties to this case, meaning the legislature and the executive branch, that they will, work together to address the COVID-19 pandemic. And there were some negotiations that were going on late last week and early this week, but at least for the moment, those negotiations appear to have broken down. And so at the moment, we do have a few local orders still in effect, and we have lots of statewide as well as local guidelines as far as how, what they're recommending people do. But at the moment, we don't have any statewide rules with regard to COVID-19. And so whether or not those negotiations will pick back up remains to be seen.
Well, I can't believe our time has come and gone already. And it looks like we're out of time for today's show. Eric, Eric Giordano, we need to apologize, of course, to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for again running out of time and not being able to have him on today's show.
Yeah, I'm just hoping, Luke, we can get him on again next week. So if you could work on that, we'd appreciate it. And Eric, Kasper, we really, really appreciate you joining us, and especially because, we got to be three bald guys, and I can't think of a better show, quite honestly. So thanks for joining us. Next week, we're excited to have an expert on immigration policy from the Bipartisan Policy Center in Washington, D.C., which has just come out with a national poll on immigration. So we're looking forward to hearing from her, and we'll announce that later this week. So we're excited for that.
Eric, I mentioned that I go to Madison to get my hair cut, although it's been quite a few weeks since I've had a chance to do that. And I know you're probably wondering, why do I go all the way from Wausau to Madison to get my hair cut? Well, first of all, I have to tell you that no one knows more about what's going on in Madison than the barber that I go to. So he's very insightful and really lets me know what's happening. But I have to tell you, one of the real reasons I like going to this guy is because of his cutting remarks. He has the most cutting remarks of anybody that I know.
Wow. I mean, who knew that the who knew that the road to Madison could also double as the hairway to heaven? I've been waiting to say that one for a long time. So you just set me up. Thanks, Dave. Well, thanks to our viewer. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everybody.